What's going on, guys? It's Mehdi, and inside of this video, I want to answer a very important question. Will dropping out of high school, university, or college actually make you a millionaire? Because I don't know about you, but it seems to me like every successful person, whether it's Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, Walt Disney, all of these guys dropped out of high school. Does it have a correlation to you becoming a multi-millionaire and becoming successful? Being someone from experience that has both dropped out and made millions of dollars through starting and growing my own business, I want to answer that question in 4 parts. The first one is my experience and what it was like and why I dropped out. Then I'll walk you through some of the pros and the cons. And finally, I'm going to answer the question of whether it was worth it and whether I think you should do it. Starting off, I want to explain to you a little bit about why I actually made a decision to drop out. One thing that I noticed, and it was a recent conversation that I was having with someone. We sat down and we were having a conversation and they said, look, it's interesting because in school, the one thing that they ask you, they don't ask you what you want to be in life. They don't ask you what business you want to go on to own. They ask you, what's your dream job? And that clicked and it made me think back. You Americans call it middle school and we call it primary school. So made me think back to middle school or primary school. And I remember my teacher vividly asking me what I wanted to do as my dream job. And everyone around me was drawing firefighters. And that was a task. You have to draw your dream job. And people drew policemen. People drew doctors. I don't know how people drew lawyers because they need pretty good art skills for that. But I drew Batman. And the reason that I drew Batman at the time is because I wanted exactly what Batman had. Batman seemed to have all the free time in the world. He seemed to know how to fight. He was a multi-millionaire and his lifestyle seemed a lot more attractive to me than the average police officer or firefighter. Not to say that we don't need these people in society, but again, I just didn't kind of know. And the teacher, she told me off, of course, from very early on. It wasn't a particular job or career path that I was set on. And anytime the careers advisors or teachers would sit there and ask me, well, what do you want to do for a living? I just never had an answer. And it wasn't that I was bad at education. I actually got straight A's. A lot of the things, like I was in high sets for science. I got A stars, back-to-back, English, math. Interestingly enough, I did very bad, considering that I'm really good with my numbers today. But it never really clicked. And something about the education system seemed like a scam to me. And this is when it became really evident. The way it worked in the UK where I studied is you have primary school. Before that, you have preschool, nursery. And then you have reception, which is like after preschool or kindergarten, and then you have primary school. So during primary school, things went from having fun, playing sports, to now doing exams and learning math and English. And I found those concepts to be pretty interesting. But I remember I got to a stage where it was about year 4, year 5, and year 6. And they prepare you for something called the SATs, the SATs. I was preparing for these exams and they made it seem like it's one of the biggest things that you have to do. Like you have to study. If you fail this exam, you're going to end up as a garbage man. This is what a lot of the teachers said. And it's funny because garbage men make more on average than the average teacher in the UK, which is hilarious. Essentially, when I was sitting there, this teacher hyped up this exam to be this end-all and be-all moment that would just carve my entire life. So I took it seriously, I studied, and I passed. And it's like right when I reached the top of the food chain in primary school, being in year 6, passing this crazy exam, we get shifted over to high school. In the UK, what they call secondary school. And I realized, well, it kind of feels like I'm in the same ladder, right? Like I'm just back where I started. I'm at the bottom of the food chain. Now I have to go through like 4 or 5 years. And yeah, I'm going to make some friends. And I did make a lot of great friends at the time, but something just doesn't feel right. And I remember it got to about year 11. So in my school, the way they did it is they skipped a year. So a regular school would go from year 8, year 9, year 10, year 11. My school went from year 8 to year 10. So we skipped an entire year and I was one of the youngest, being born in June. So I'm one of the youngest, I'm getting good grades, and again, now we have an exam called the GCSEs, which is supposed to be this exam, the end all and be all. If you fail this, you're going to end up a garbage man. At this point, I was thinking, maybe a garbage man doesn't seem like such a bad job. I'd have to go out there and listen to this teacher telling me that I'm going to become one. Essentially, I'm studying for these exams, and we have something called Careers Advisor Day, where some individuals come to the school and they sit you down and they start to talk to you about career path choices. And I'm sitting down and I'm speaking to this person, and I don't even know what they do. Their job is to tell people what careers to have. That doesn't really sound like a real career. So I wasn't very interested in what they had to say. One of the ladies that came in, she was very poorly dressed. Her breath, it wasn't the nicest. And I'm trying to be as polite as possible. And she says, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I don't know. And it's like she's expecting me to have an answer here. And I think I was like 13 or 14 at the time, right? I was 14. And she comes in and everyone's like, yeah, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. And I was like, I don't want to be any of these things. I just want to make a lot of money. Because I realized very early on that you need money to do things. You need money to buy a house. You need money to buy a car. car, you need money to go on vacation, you need money to live. So I want whatever makes the most amount of money. And after doing some research, it doesn't sound like a lot of these careers make a lot of money. And the interesting thing that I found is nobody really spoke about starting a business. Even the people that studied business weren't taught to go start their own business. They were being taught to work in other people's businesses, which was a very, very strange concept to me. The first careers advice the day came, then they had a second one. And during the second one, I was at a very different stage in my life where, if you watched out the video where I went from a dropout to making over $100,000 a month, I highly recommend you watch that video. I had a cousin of mine that was a personal trainer and I built him a website, right? I don't know why I built him a website. I didn't have any special skills. I just built it because I was very, very bored. And after building him a website, he took me to meet his business partner. And his business partner, after I built him a website and actually made some money doing it, he took me to an event. The second careers advisor day was supposed to be on a Friday and I completely missed that day. I remember my cousin called my father and he said, listen, your son's not going to school today. And my father, he flipped out. He said, what do you mean he's not going to school? It's one of the most important days. He said, well, look, he's going to this event. He's going to meet a lot of wealthy business owners and it's going to be a great opportunity for him. With a bit of resistance, my father agreed and I went to this event and I'm on the train. And again, I'm with this bald guy, my first mentor. And he was a nice guy and he kept asking me, well, what do you want to do? Right? And I said, I want to make a lot of money. He said, that you have a great mindset. So it's the first time I didn't feel penalized. I didn't feel like someone made me feel like shit for wanting to make a lot of money. And in school, it was the complete opposite. It's like, oh no, you shouldn't just want to make a lot of money. You need to pick a good career. What's a good career? That's amazing, man. You got a good mindset. That's the right attitude. And I think, in business, it's important to have that. So he takes me to this event and I have no idea what these guys are talking about building businesses, etc. I'm just sitting there. I'm the youngest person in the room, 14 at the time. Everyone around me is 30, 35, 40, etc. Cut a long story short, my ears catch the words of the speaker. He starts speaking and he starts asking questions at the front of the room. He says, look, everybody, I want you to participate. I'm going to ask you some questions and I need everyone here to raise their hands. Who here is a doctor? Hands go up. Who here is a lawyer? Hands go up. Who here is an engineer? Hands are going up. And people are proud of their accomplishments of becoming engineers. So I was like, all right, maybe I did. Maybe I f***ed it, right? Maybe I should have been at that careers advisor day, learning how to become one of these roles. And then the tone of the room changes. He sits there and says, who here is happy? Hands start dropping. Who here is in over X amount of debt? 100K debt. Hands at the top of the ceiling. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, this is insane. Who here has taken over 2 vacations this year? Virtually no one's hands are up in the room apart from just 2 people. And they're an old couple. So I'm sitting there and it's like this massive realization moment that every suspicion that I had from primary school to high school, all these little suspicions I had of these lies that I felt like I was being told the entire time had come to light, and it confirmed everything that I already believed. And on top of that, it shattered my old beliefs that you have to be a doctor or a lawyer or engineer to be successful. And it just seemed to me like at the time that everybody that had picked these career paths has dedicated 5 years, 10 years, 20 years studying was in a miserable position. Because at the end of it, even if they had a bit of money, they still didn't have freedom. And I realized that's not what I wanted. And the speaker at the front of the room was a young guy, 26 years old, multi-millionaire. And in his slideshow presentation, I saw him traveling business class, taking his parents on vacation, retiring his father, driving luxury supercars. And I'm not saying that's what success is about, driving luxury supercars, even though it's nice, but it was aspirational. And it's something that I could see myself wanting and doing. I wanted to retire my parents. I wanted to travel all over the world. I wanted to have time freedom. And it just seemed like the conventional path didn't lead to that. By example, and it was at that stage where I remember leaving that event room and I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think the same. I felt like I just found the cure to cancer, right? I felt like I discovered something insane. The veil on the world was just lifted in front of my very eyes. And I was sitting there and I went back to my friends in school and I was like, school's a scam. And they started looking at me crazy. What's wrong with this guy, right? He goes to one business event, Anyways, I ended up losing a lot of friends because of it. Essentially, I went back to school and I just couldn't pay attention anymore. And I realized this is not where I want to be. I'm wasting my time and there's no reason for me to be here. Like, I don't see myself going to college. I don't see myself going to university. I need to drop out as soon as physically possible. So it was at that point I made the decision to drop out, right? I finished my last exam. It was like a few months to go left of school and I can just completely left. Now, legally in the UK, you have to study until a certain age. But because my school was set up weird, I just dropped out earlier than expected and I just never came, right? I got calls from college, telling me, yo, come study here, and I just didn't take it. And it was at that stage where I started to shift my attention to focusing on building a business. And that's why I dropped out. So that's the first reason as to why I dropped out, because I believed the conditioning the education system teaches is designed to enslave you into working a job. And the end outcome of working a job isn't fruitful. Even if you have a 6-figure yearly salary, you're still a prisoner with your time. And I realized that's not the life that I wanted. So that's why I dropped out. The second thing I want to talk about is the actual cons. Why what was the difficult things about dropping out of school? If you're someone that's sitting there and you're considering, well, I want to drop out, these are things that you have to be aware of that I wasn't aware of at the time. So when I dropped out, I realized, well, I don't have to be here every day at a specific time. I don't have to wake up 7 in the morning, get ready, be at school for 8 o'clock. And there's no consequences. I'm not going to get detention. I'm not going to get punished. I'm not going to get kicked out. My parents are not going to get called in to sit down and have a meeting with the teacher and then end up getting beatings at home. There's none of that, right? So you unlock a new level of freedom, but because you're so conditioned to be disciplined with these consequences to show up at a specific place at a specific time, complete certain deadlines, that all disappears, meaning you have to create your own. So I'd say a few of the cons is, number one, it was a very lonely journey. And I think that's one of the things that forced me to grow up very, very quick, because I could no longer relate to the people at my age group. They had a completely different train of thought. So the people that were my best friends at the time, we became no longer friends because we were on such different paths. So that's the first thing that you have to accept. The journey is going to be extremely lonely, and you end up spending a lot of time with yourself. And you could look at that as a con, but I also look at it as a pro, because you learn a lot about who you are as a person during that time, because your time isn't stolen away from you. Your time isn't robbed of you and put into this little education machine. So the first thing is the discipline, because now it's down to you to make sure that you wake up at a specific time every day. It's very important. I know it sounds simple, but it's so overlooked. And when you have that freedom, it's a lot more difficult than it sounds. The second thing is, now that you've taken yourself out of someone else's education system, you got to begin creating your own. And you have to get very clear on the type of topics you want to learn and get very disciplined with studying and practicing them. So there are benefits to school, which is, if you do want to become a doctor, if you do want to become a lawyer, if you do want to become an engineer, there's a specific syllabus that they follow to help you get from current situation, which is not knowing anything about the medical profession, to getting to a stage where you can confidently and competently practice on your patients. And they have an entire process. So now it's in your hands to build that process. So you have to pick and choose the right topics. You have to sift through all the BS that's out there and understand the right topics that you need to learn in order to acquire the skills that you need to get to your end desired destination. So if that's building a business, you have to learn how to sell, because you make money on the other side of exchanging value, but no one's going to accept your value unless you can sell them on why it's valuable. You have to learn how to market, get eyeballs, get attention. The minute you drop out and no one knows that you exist on the face of the earth, you're a nobody. So you have to learn the skill of marketing to really build your presence and start attracting eyeballs. You have to learn branding. How do you appear as a trustworthy figure? How do you become someone that's capable of gaining other people's trust to connect with them and now do business with them? Because like I said, you're at ground zero. You're a nobody. Once you begin learning those skills, and that was a con, because you have to now design your own syllabus. And the final one is, it takes a lot of self-discipline. And this is where routine comes in, because with the education system, you have a set routine. You eat lunch at this time, you have a break at this time, and you're set to work consistently throughout these hours. And when you're sitting at home with your laptop and your phone and trying to build a business, it can be very easy to get detoured, because there's a show that you want to watch, that you want to catch up on. YouTube turns into entertainment very quickly. We are one video away from going from education to entertainment. So it becomes very, very difficult to stay disciplined. So it's important to really build that discipline through set actions. And I'd say those are the biggest cons of dropping out. The loneliness, having to design your own schedule, the awkward period of time where you're not really going to be able to relate to people, because the successful people that are at where you want to be are a different level. And the people that are the same age group as you, they're going to education, school, college, university, they're partying, but you're on a different path. And I'd say when I dropped out, I think that was one of the biggest cons, because a lot of the time I had no friends. I made a new set of friends that were also dropouts, because we could relate on that. But these dropouts weren't business owners. They were drug dealers or doing things that weren't necessarily where I wanted to go. Best way for me to put it. So those are the cons. Now let's talk about the pros. Dropping out has an insane amount of pros, and I would argue that this is the reason that so many people that have dropped out do become multimillionaires. The first one is, you get to control your own mental conditioning. You get to take full and total control over your environment. Because if you look at your belief sets right now, like, why do you believe what you believe? And it's a very important question you always want to be asking yourself. A lot of it has to do with your environment. Let's say you've been a part of a friendship group for over 10 years, and your friendship group believes that it's okay to relax 4 days a week and just work 3 days a week. It's okay to slack off. And this is the belief, this is the standard, this is the set level that you've become used to accepting. That's a belief that you've adopted through your surroundings. Because you believe that, it's going to change the way you act, and it's going to change the results that you get in your life. But when you switch that, now that you're by yourself, you get to write down your own core beliefs. And I remember back when I was first starting out, I hadn't achieved any 10K months. I was still broke. I was a dropout, no qualifications, no job, nothing. The one book I read was by Patrick Bet-David. And I remember the name of the book. It's called Doing the Impossible. And there's one thing that he broke down, which he said, your core beliefs are like your navigation. As a human, as a man, as a woman, you act based on what you believe. If you don't even know what your core beliefs are, it's important to write them down. At the end of the book, he gave me an exercise to basically write down my core beliefs. So I started to invent and create my own conditioning. Things that I believed were true, not things that other people had told me were true. And that's the first core benefit. I think the second thing, and this is massively important, is how much extra time it gives you to make mistakes. Because I'll tell you what, from 15, when I started my first official business, I had a lot of failures. But it was okay, because while other people are in these classrooms being conditioned to learn theory, I am getting real world experience in failing. And it gave me a lot of buffer time to work past my failures, because your failures are like a stepping stone. It's not, okay, this thing didn't work out. It's, okay, this thing showed me what doesn't work, so now I can spend my time on what might potentially work. So it gave me an opportunity to try e-commerce, drop shipping, forex trading, like all the different business opportunities that you see online today. It gave me an opportunity to try all of those and still be okay, still have more than enough time in my hands. Because I confidently believe that by the time you get to mid-25, like mid-20s, life is a lot more challenging now. You have a larger weight of responsibilities on your shoulders. You might have to pay rent, you got to pay your bills, you got to go out there and maybe you have a lady at the time, you got to pay for her. You might even have kids. So there's so much more weight on your shoulders to give you less buffer to basically fail. But dropping out of school definitely gives you a much better opportunity to fail and still be okay. That's the most liberating thing about dropping out. You have all this extra time on your hands to now work through failures to build up to success. And I'd say the final thing is it allows you to achieve success at a very young age. Because I remember 15, I started out, 2 years of failing. 17, I generated a lot of money. By the time I was 18, I had my first 6 figures stacked in liquid cash in my bank. And I was very, very blessed to be further ahead, right? It gave me an opportunity to rub shoulders, network with the right people, start traveling the world. By the time I was 19, I had made my first $1 million online. At 22, I've now crossed over $3 million online. To put things into perspective, had I not dropped out at the age of 15, almost being 23 years old now, that would have been 8 years later that I probably would have made a start. And I would have missed out on massive opportunities in that space. So I would have started a decade later. So let's say I did stick to university and high school and college. I probably would have graduated by 22. I probably would have been where I'm at today 8 years later down the line, meaning I would be 30 years old versus 22. And there's a lot of things, a lot of factors that could have come in the meantime, such as being married, having a kid, and the weight of responsibilities, having a job to stick to that I would have had to balance building a business with. And there would have been a lot of things that probably would have held me back massively from growing the business to the scale that it's at today. The final verdict, to answer your question, do I feel like dropping out will make you a millionaire? Well, if your goal is to become a multi-millionaire through working a 6-figure salary job, saving your money, gradually investing into real estate, and that's the career path that you've chosen, then absolutely not. Dropping out is probably not for you. You should stick to school, stick to the books, and study until you graduate. But if you're someone like me and your goal and vision is you want to start a business, you want to operate outside of society's norms, and you're someone that is hungry to learn more, educate yourself, and become the best version of yourself that you physically can through your own learning style, through your own topics that you want to select, then 100%. I undoubtedly wouldn't have been in the same position that I'm in today if I didn't choose to drop out. So that's my verdict on dropping out. If I could go back and do it all over again, I probably would have done it a few sooner. Essentially, I hope this video today gives you a lot more knowledge and information on why it might be a good decision for you. Because the education system, looking back at it, hasn't changed much, right? If you look at a car, and I've seen a famous picture of this or famous video of this, if you look at a car from 50 years ago, it looks insanely different to what cars look like today. If you look at houses, or some houses from 50 years ago, they look entirely different. If you look at phones from 50 years ago to today, they look entirely different. But if you look at a classroom from 50 years ago to today, it looks exactly the same. There are people that are incredibly smart on social media, accessible at the tap of one button on the internet, that have a wealth of knowledge and information that can teach you more in 5 minutes than you will ever learn through a week of formal education. My advice to you, if you're watching this and you're considering dropping out, or you have dropped out, is keep learning. Keep hand selecting the right topics, and more importantly, get yourself a mentor. Get yourself someone that has far more years of experience than you do, that can narrow down and significantly decrease the amount of time it takes you for you to get from where you're at to your end and desired goal. So with that being said, hit that subscribe button, comment below what sort of video you'd like to see next, and I'll see you in the next one.